Welcome to the LandLife podcast with your host, PJ Riley.
Hey guys, welcome to the LandLife podcast. My name is PJ Riley. Guys, if you like the podcast, if you like my new background here that I got, don't forget, like, subscribe, leave a comment maybe if you like it, good or bad. Just let me know kind of what you think about the podcast and how I can make it better, and kind of things you like. Oh, guys, today we got a great guest today. So this is the first female guest I've ever had on the LandLife podcast.
Really? I didn't realize
yes,
that.
You are.
Crazy.
I didn't choose someone. She messaged me, but the very first guest is smarter than me by a mile and can also beat me up. So this is a great combination of a person to have on our first guest as our first female guest. So AnnMaria DeMars. I knew I'd screw that up. If I said it too fast. So AnnMaria DeMars. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Great. Excellent. I love that background too.
Thank you. It's from one of our games, Aztec Meet the Maya. I actually went to Belize to meet the Maya. It was super duper cool.
That's awesome. So AnnMaria, tell us a little bit like how you got started. You're in the business world, you're in tech, you're in all kinds of different things. Tell us kind of how you got started in that world.
Well, I have been in the tech world a very long time. I have actually programmed using punched cards. So, and then I go to La Brea tar pits, and in the museum, they show there's part of history. Here's how we used to enter data. I'll tell you honestly, I was a very bad kid. I was in trouble all the time in juvenile hall and foster care and all that. And I was also a very smart kid, I will say very modestly. My old judo coach says it's not bragging if you can back it up. And I realized a couple of things that for me to get a job, I had no connections, I had no money, I knew nothing. And at the time, anything tech was starting to blow up, right? That if you could breathe, you could get a good job as a software developer. And I figured I better do that because I knew I had a personality that could blister paint at 30 paces. I mean, I went into judo because I wanted to beat people up. And so I was really good at math, and I followed that track as far as I could go. I started programming with Fortran 77, that is 1977, back when it was new. And then I was 9 months pregnant with my first daughter. I was an industrial engineer, one of two in General Dynamics in San Diego, and they had thousands and thousands of people working. I was one of two female engineers they had in the plant. And they wanted to get me out of the plant because they thought I might fall off one of the machines. And we had giant like plank mills and that to build airplanes. Now, why they thought pregnant women randomly fall over, I don't know. So then they sent me to some more programming classes just to get me out of the factory. And they were focused on statistical software. And I just love that stuff. And then I did the thing that they tell you not to do in business school. I had gotten divorced, and I met this really cute guy, Ronda Rousey, and he was a much higher level in the company, and I married him. And they have anti-nepotism rules, of course, so I had to take a different job. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I really like school, and I had gotten my first degree. I got my MBA when I was 21, so I was good at school. And so University of California, Riverside was down the road. I went down and got a doctorate and specialized in applied statistics. And it's funny because other people, that I know, they had these real career plans. And, I went here because I was interested in Jerry Carlson's work on the learning acquisition potential device. And I went to UC Riverside because it was down the road, and why not? And that's how I got a PhD. And then when Ron had his accident and then passed away, I was working as professor, and I needed to make more money to support all these kids. So I went back to consulting, writing customized software, and did that for years until the kids got big enough that I could kind of do what I wanted to do. And I had seen, my ticket out is I was good at math. I would say I was good at math and I was good at judo. And other than those two things, honestly, I had nothing going for me. I had no money. I had no family connections. I was not a good kid. And that was my ticket out. And so I thought if I could come up with something to help kids that were like me and not very good schools, say, to get better at math, it would change their whole trajectory in life, like it did for me. So I had the idea for a really long time. When I was in grad school back in the 80s, I did some computer games, but if you can imagine what, like the very first Macs were, it was just text-based and that. So I went off on other stuff that was less risky because I had, a husband who was ill and all these kids. Yeah. And then when all the kids were grown and I had the opportunity to kind of do what I wanted to do, I was working on it with a company on an American Indian reservation. And we decided to make games that were focused on Indigenous culture. So kids could learn that there's always been math, right? My friend Eric Longi was the first member of the Spirit Lake Dakota to earn a doctorate. And he was talking to his grandson once, and his grandson was telling him, "Oh, I'm an Indian, I don't need math." And Eric says, "My boy, we were a nomadic people. We roamed all over these plains. Did you just see dead Dakota laying around frozen in its place? No, because we could estimate how long it could take. We could calculate, how many people one buffalo could feed through the winter." And so we decided we'd make these games. And we went to some investors who said, "No one cares about Indians." This is a direct quote. Other investors who said, "We know what people who found successful gaming companies look like, and they are not Latina grandmothers." And I said, I don't know, can I swear on your podcast? I didn't hear you.
Swear whatever you want.
Okay, so I said, "Fuck you people, I'm gonna do it anyway." And I went out and I got research grants from the National Institutes of Health, from the US Department of Agriculture, from the National Science Foundation. We did 3 Kickstarters. So we did it completely apart from the traditional tech investor round. And we raised a couple $1 million, and we now have 20 games out on the market. Well, actually, we're down to 19. One of them, we kind of did a little foray in the preschool market and said, that's not us. We're really focused on kids from like age 8 to 14, because that's kind of in the trajectory where they're figuring out who they're going to be, right?
Absolutely.
So that was very, very long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the 8 to 14 thing too is kind of where, we really pay attention early on in elementary school, in kindergarten, first grade or whatever. And then it's almost like you either have it or you don't through high school. So that 8 to 14 is that if you have it or you don't. So this gives those kids a little bit of an advantage, maybe something that will help them get ahead where the teachers and the parents maybe say, "You know what, she's just not good at math. She's just not good. She'll figure this out in high school." 14 rolls around in high school and they figure it out there if they do or don't. But that's really good age group to hit it. That's pretty interesting you did that. I want to go back a little bit, actually way before. We got to go back. We got to unpack this story a little bit better. So you're a young mother, right? We have young people listening to this podcast. They're thinking, should I go into business? Should I do something? Or should I just kind of ease back, get a job, and take care of my family? What was the thought process to go jump into something huge like this versus something maybe you could have, it's not necessarily easier, but it would be a more consistent income source, I guess.
Well, I've read that you live your life forward, but you only understand it backwards. I did not leap into business at first. My first jobs were at large companies. I was at Honeywell. I was at General Dynamics. I recommend to anybody who's thinking about going into business, if they possibly can, go work for somebody else first that does that thing. Either that's a customer of the thing you want to do, or that does the thing you want to do. So for example, my first company did customized software mostly for larger organizations, University of California, BAE Systems. And you wanted a database created. You wanted something to collect data done. And I had worked for a couple of large companies that did exactly that. You're going to have to learn whatever it is, whether it's how to run a pet store or how to write software. So you may as well go work somewhere where they're paying you while you learn it, right? Because if you just say, "Oh, I'm going to start a company," that whole time you're learning how to do that thing, you've got $0 coming in. Where one example, I worked for this company, MedStat, And they were really great at putting proposals together for big companies. Here's what our report's going to look like. Here's the data that you're going to get. So I learned that from them, how to pitch those companies, how to put those contracts together, all that boring stuff that's part of running a business. You're going to have to learn somewhere at some point. You may as well get paid by somebody else while learning it. Now, I'm not saying you don't do a good job for those people. I mean, I tried to do as good a job as I could. But if you could spend those first few years learning the nuts and bolts of running a business, getting customers, marketing, as well as the actual skills, then when you go out and start your own business, you have some experience, you have some knowledge, maybe you have connections that you can then get as your first clients. So for me, I didn't jump out and start my first business right out of grad school. I think it's a less risky thing. And I was, again, not somebody that came from a background of wealth and privilege. So I didn't have mom or dad writing large checks to bankroll me while I figured it out.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So if you have a job, a career or a business you want to start, maybe find jobs that are kind of in that same field, learn the ropes while someone's paying you, and then jump into it on your own.
Exactly. Yeah. And then maybe you can save up some money. So when those first 6 months or year or 2 years before it pays off, you don't starve and have to live, in a dumpster behind Gelson's.
Especially when you're raising kids, especially if you're doing it on your own, kids are not cheap. You know as well as I do that.
Yeah, those little suckers cost money, man.
Yes, as we have kids in sports. Everything costs so much money. So you have to have money, or they're going to be just sitting at home by themselves all day while you go to try this business endeavor. So you said you had no connections, no family was giving you money. There's no big check. There's no big bank account that you're taking from. So you would need some sort of relationships. You have to build relationships with different people, to get to where you wanted to get. How did you build relationships? Whether it's through school, were you going out meeting people? Like, how are you doing that?
Well, my first consulting jobs came through school. So I specialized in applied statistics, and a lot of my friends, fellow classmates, I was the only statistician they knew, right? So they would get a job as assistant superintendent somewhere and need somebody, and they would call me up. And I'd say my first companies were all focused on things that are very kind of boring. Like I said, create a database, create a site for entering data, that sort of stuff, write up reports to federal agencies, but it paid the bills. Yeah. And almost all of my business came from referrals. Somebody would say to their friend who just got a grant, hey, who's doing your evaluation? They'd say, AnnMaria, you should call her up. So some of it came from that. Some of it came from going to conferences. I got a contract for about $100,000, probably paid for every conference fee I ever went to. Somebody saw me at a conference, and there was some company that was looking for statisticians doing the kind of work that I do. And they offered a finder's fee. And he said, oh, I saw this woman at conference. You should ask her. So part of it is going out and networking. You never know who is going to be that person who's going to refer you. Yeah. And I think, again, not coming from a background of wealth and privilege, I think you're nice to everybody, the secretary, the janitor, because that could have been my mom, right?
Yeah.
Just you should be, and then you never know. And I've gotten recommendations from people that I taught their kid judo, and they were so appreciative of it that they said, oh, here's this opportunity.
Yeah. So get out there, be nice to people, talk to people, be approachable, be a generally good person. You have your idea in the back of your head, what you're aiming for, but it's just be a nice person. You can meet a lot of nice people. So let's move a little bit farther forward now. So 7 Generation Games. First of all, what's the meaning behind the name 7 Generation Games?
We started on the Spirit Lake Nation, and my 2 original partners were both members of the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation. And then April got a job as general manager of the casino. So she had to sell her share because they're very strict about having any outside interest. And then Eric was diagnosed with cancer. Now, fortunately, it's 10 years later and he is doing well, But at the time, he said, look, if I only have a cup 2-3 years left, I'm spending going to powwows, I'm spending with my grandkids, I'm not spending it growing this company. So because the company had been called Spirit Lake Consulting, and because I was the only founder left and I was not a member of the tribe, I had to change the name. I mean, Eric says to me, I can't tell you the name, right? You know, you can take the contracts, we can split the company, but the name does not belong to me, it belongs to the tribe. So we're trying to come up with something that kind of showed what we stood for. And he said 7 generations is a common thing across a lot of Native American tribes, that to understand someone, you look 7 generations back, how they were raised and how their parents were raised and their grandparents were raised. And in deciding what you should do, you look 7 generations forward, not just how is this going to affect next quarter's results, but how is this going to affect my kids and my grandkids? And I really think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And if you want to affect the future, there's no better way than education.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you guys marketing this? Who, you know, what avenues are you using? What are social media?
Here's a really funny thing. We started out thinking we were going to be selling to predominantly schools and American Indian reservations, because we started out with Native American storylines using math. Mm-hmm. And then we would get people, we did our first Kickstarter and people would message us and say, is this only for Native American kids? Because I have trouble getting my kids to learn math too. And Maria, who came in as another co-founder and our CEO, says, this game is for you if you have $10. So she said, I was never a plumber in overalls. I loved the Mario Brothers games. I didn't learn anything from them. So we started out focused on American Indian reservations. And then we had lots of people contacting us. Now we have 110,000 users. So we started marketing then at things like education conferences. But here's the funny thing. Most of our income now comes from customized software development, which was customized games. So we did a game. We were invited by the government of Chile to open an office in Chile. And we had done games in Spanish and English. So they said, well, we have it's important for us that our kids learn English. So we went to Chile and we got funding from the Chilean government to do a game on Chilean history that's in Spanish. And we have some Spanish and English games. And then we get a call from these folks saying, could you do a game in Lakota in English? We're like, well, we could code it, but we don't speak Lakota. And the man on the other end says, well, I'm calling from Pine Ridge and we speak Lakota. So we did a couple of games for them. And then we had another group call us up and say, well, how about Dakota? So, well, do you speak Dakota? Well, yes, we do. So, and then we have so basically we've had people now coming to us saying, hey, could you make a game for us? Yeah. And now we're working on one that's not Indigenous at all. It was just a company. They kind of wanted something white label. They do educational games. They wanted one on statistics and for middle school kids. And they said, well, could you do a game? And like, do we have money? Yes. So it's crazy because our marketing of our larger side of our company now has basically been people call us up and ask us to do stuff. So that's not really a Harvard Business School case study for marketing. So now anybody listening, we do customized games and it's super cool because we actually kind of fell backwards into this, that we were making so many games that we developed our own sort of unique platform so we can make games far faster and cheaper by a lot than the typical educational game. So the first game we did probably took us 8 months, and now we can do one in a couple of months. Wow. So you can imagine the cost reduction there. And normally the problem with making games is you need a lot of very experienced software developers. Well, we now have made it so someone with less than a year's experience in software development can come in and make really good games using the platform that we have. So that's our marketing has been, people call us up and say, hey, will you make us a game? So we're actually working on now more real grown up marketing.
Wow. So it was a lot of word of mouth then, it seems like. It's like people talking to people and then they come to you, hey, we also want this, we want to do this as well. So let's say I have my kids are in elementary school. Let's just say, for example, they're much older than that, but let's say my kids have a school. I want games in my school. what do I do?
They could just click on the link on our website or email us and we will set up with them. Actually, if they were in one of 6 states, Arizona, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico, or Oregon, if they're in any of those 6 states, they can get everything for free. We have a contract with the U.S. Department of Agriculture that came out of their COVID rapid response when all the schools went to learning online, right? And they said, we want to help rural schools. These states have a high indigenous population. They have a high rural population. Give your games to any school in these 6 states and we will cover the cost.
Wow.
So if you're sorry that Colorado isn't one of them, though actually we have made some arrangements for some schools that are right on the border with South Dakota or schools that have a very high indigenous population. But even if they don't, they can contact us, go through the growing math training and get the games for free. So that's good through the end of this year. And then,
all right. Yeah, I downloaded the app. I played a few games. That's about my math level is about 8 to not 14. Let's stick to 8 to 10. That's probably me. But no, it's great games, man. Everything looks awesome. You know, it really does. It's easy to use, easy to understand, and I think they could definitely help a lot of kids. On the business side of things, so that's you know, I know we have a lot of people listening that they're business people, marketing people, sales people. I heard a quote from you. I read a quote from you. It said, and I'll read it, I have always argued that the best defense is a good offense. Now that was in relation to martial arts, right?
Right.
What about in business? Would you say the same thing is true in business?
Well, if you think of offense as going out there and being proactive, absolutely. Oh my goodness. I know so many people who have good ideas for games, but their games don't go anywhere because they want to sit in their office and code. And most people are software developers tend to be fairly introverted because you spend a lot of time just you and your computer.
Yeah.
And I actually very much like coding. And if I had the choice, that's all I would do. But if you don't get out there and promote yourself, promote your company, you know, I'll give you an example. Right now we have a community round. Are you familiar with community rounds, crowd equity?
No.
Oh, this goes back to my...
Oh, crowdfunding?
No, different.
Okay, then no, go explain. Sorry.
So this goes back to I believe any good deed you do comes back to you. I mean, maybe not in the same form or at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I will give a very short version of this. We had some students that wanted our help. They had to analyze a company for some class project and they needed actual financial data. We let them do it. They ended up making the finals of some big finance competition. And they went to Wharton Business School and Wharton Impact Ventures came and said, we would like to endorse your company if you want to do a crowd equity round. So crowdfunding, you probably know, Kickstarter that you want to build a product. We've done it a few times. We want to make a new game. If enough people say, I'll buy it and put up money, then we make the game. And then you put in money, you get a game. And maybe if you put in enough money, you get to be listed as a co-producer, you get to be a character in the game or whatever. So that's how crowdfunding works.
Okay.
Crowd equity, you're not getting a product, you're getting part of the company. You're actually investing in the company. Now, normally, if I'm going out and raising funds, which we've done in the past, you need to be a accredited investor. You need to make at least $200,000 a year because the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, doesn't want people going out and, you know, canvassing mom and pop and grandma and people who aren't very, you know, very educated about businesses and ripping them off. Mm-hmm. So as a startup, I can't go out and try to raise money from the average person in the street. However, if I go through one of these crowd equity vehicles, they come in and they do all the due diligence. And believe me, they do a lot. They look at all your contracts with your employees. They look at all your financial statements. They see that everything that you say is true and above board. And then you can go and try to raise money from the community. And like normally with us, when we do a seed round, the minimum invest is $10,000. With a crowd equity round, the minimum invest is $100. So it gives the chance for the little guy to get in and invest in these early stage startups. So we had not thought about doing it, but when Wharton said, hey, we will endorse you for it, we'll even get you a better deal because we're Wharton and we already went through and scrutinized a lot of your financial records. And so, so that actually opened today.
Wow, that's awesome. And I'll put in the notes below are they allowed to go see that today?
Yes.
Okay.
Today.
I don't want to, put something out there that's not available, but yeah, so I'll put some in the notes. Where would they go if they wanted to do that today?
It's WeFunder / 7th Generation. I'll have to look, but
and we can, well,
it's literally, it's just say, but I think it's WeFunder / 7th Generation Games.com.
Yeah.
Somehow I hit Dakota on my keyboard. I need to change my keyboard back to English now.
You speak Lakota?
No, but they send us if we're working with somebody who does Lakota or Dakota, they'll send us the translation of the text. And boy, it is so much easier if you there's actually a Dakota keyboard. Yeah,
okay,
literally.
So
it launched like half an hour ago.
Oh my gosh. So perfect. If you guys want it in there, it's wefunder.com / 7th Generation Games. And I'll put everything in the show notes as well. So I want to ask you one thing too. I can tell, and I've done a little bit of research on you. You have something that, maybe not a lot of people have. You have grit. You have, I
thought you were going to say gold medal.
Oh, we'll get to that too. Simmer down. We'll get to that too. Don't worry. No, you have grit in every aspect, business and also in martial arts. We'll get to that in a sec. But what would you say is one just general thing people need these days to get ahead, to move ahead in the business world?
To be honest, I think one thing that's been really helpful for me is people who have my back. My husband is our chief technology officer. Mm-hmm. And I know Maria's husband, my CEO and our co-founder, her husband, when she said, hey, I'm going to go in with AnnMaria and do this gaming company, he didn't say, are you nuts? You're a sports journalist, or you're going to take our savings and we're going to live off that while you try and make this. No, he just said, okay. And same thing with my husband. When I said, I really want to make educational games, and I know the amount of software development it will take, and I can't do it on my own. Dennis is amazing. He is so brilliant. I mean, I'm good at software development, but he can make a computer sit up and bake, right? Wow. And he just said, okay. And I think having someone who really has your back, whether it's a spouse or a parent or a best friend, and I'm not the biggest touchy-feely type, but I don't have a lot of friends. I don't have a lot of people I'm very close with, but those that I do have would do anything for me and vice versa. I just got a message this morning saying, can you hop on a plane on Thursday? I need you to be there. And I'm like, sure, I'll be there.
Why not?
Book me a ticket, LAX.
That's awesome. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. We were talking about judo, and at about age 12, you decided to start doing something that, not a lot of people do, right? I think it was 12. Yeah. You decided to put on a gi and throw people around a room. What made you, as a 12-year-old girl, what made you start doing that?
Well, my mother, I get this question all the time, and I always say the same thing. I should make up a good lie, because the truth is not very dramatic. My mother did not make a lot of money. She was a secretary. She had 5 kids. And she somehow one year saved up enough, scraped together enough for a family membership at the Y. And she drove up to the Y and pushed me out of the car and told me to go join something because I was a short, fat little kid. And she thought I needed exercise. And before Title IX had passed, which was when I started judo, way back when, most sports did not allow girls to join, which is the thing my daughters have difficulty wrapping their heads around.
Me
right?
too.
They could just say, girls don't play baseball, girls can't play run track, and whatever it was. Yeah. So the only 3 options that I had were track, swimming, and judo. And because those were the only 3 that were allowing girls to join where I lived. And I was a short, fat little kid, so I didn't run very fast. And I was a fat little girl, so I didn't want to put on a swimsuit. And judo had other girls in it. And I thought, I can fight. I got 3 brothers.
Yeah.
So I went out there, and actually my mom didn't buy me a judo gi for the first 6 months because it was $12, and that was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So she was going to see if I stuck with it. And then after the first year, my mom didn't have money to pay for the Y membership again. And the judo coach went, and my mom did not believe in charity. And I don't know. I mean, I think if you're on food stamps or whatever, you need to feed your kids, go you, right? But my mom did not go for that. And so the instructor went to her and said, she can help me as assistant instructor and that will pay for her Y membership. And so that's what I did for the next several years.
Wow. And so you start doing judo. You didn't just show up to classes though. You're jumping into competitions. That's a huge step up. I mean, anybody who competes in martial arts knows, competing is completely different than just attending classes. So kind of how did that start? Who told you show up to your first competition and you can do this there too?
Well, the first competition I went to was at the YMCA where I did judo. And I think it was the only tournament they ever had. But just luck by me, I walked over there, I put on my judo gi, I fought some girls, I won. And I was always in trouble in school. I was always fighting. I was a very angry kid. And I was always getting sent to the principal's office and suspended and kicked out of school and sent to juvenile hall. And then I went to this judo tournament and I won. They're like, well, you should go to the next tournament. My mom didn't even have gas money. People whining about gas money now. It's 25 cents a gallon and we didn't have it. But, I hopped in a car with another kid and their mom drove me there and I won those tournaments. I pretty much started winning from the get-go. I lost a few tournaments when I was 13 years old. And pretty much after that was wiping up the mat.
So competitions are pretty expensive. Kids sports are expensive, right? Everything is. How are you guys able to continue to go to these things?
That's a really good story. They were, first of all, way less expensive then.
Okay.
But I would get a ride with another kid because my mom couldn't afford to drive there. Mm-hmm. And I still remember his tournaments were $2. And my mom had 50 cents a day for lunch because she was the secretary and she would not eat lunch 4 days out of 5 and give me the $2. And I knew it too. And by God, I was coming home with a trophy if I had to rip somebody's arm off to get it.
Yeah.
And I think that is, was a big motivating factor for me that I knew it was a big sacrifice for my mom for me to be able to go to these tournaments.
Sure. $2. Wow. That's a lot different than nowadays.
It was a long time ago, but it's a lot of money if you don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to these tournaments, you're winning, you're competing, you're continuously advancing. You won big tournaments. I mean, you're a world judo champion. I know I competed myself a lot as at the local regional level. What point do you make the jump to be competing in the Pan Am Games and the World Championships? And how does it move from local to high level?
Well, the funny thing for me is I couldn't afford to go to any of these, right? So, I mean, I hitchhiked to a lot of tournaments, which is crazy, right? I'm looking at that 15-year-old girl hitchhiking up to Chicago or whatever to compete. And they would tell me not to do it. But I was like, how else am I going to get here?
Yeah.
So once I won the state championships, then
this is in California, right?
No, this was in Illinois. I was living in Illinois. I was going to college in Washington University in St. Louis. And anyway, I hitchhiked up to Chicago. I won the state championships. And if you won, they paid your way to the nationals. So the advantage for me is I didn't get to go to things until I had won a lot at the previous level enough that people say, this kid is good, let's pay her way there. So a lot of kids now, they go to all these tournaments because their parents can pay for it.
Yeah.
Where I went because I was good enough that somebody else paid for it.
Wow.
So I won the state championships. They sent me the nationals. The first time there, I got third. The next time I went, I won. I went to the US Open, won that. And then that was pretty much all you could win. There weren't world championships at the time. So I went to grad school. And I was in grad school. My friend Becky Scott calls me up and she says, get back on the mat. They just put women in the world championships. So
you were.
I talked to my advisor and he says, this is something you could do later because you are almost done your MBA. So I finished my MBA, went back to training, got pregnant. I mean, I was married at the time, but I got pregnant. And so I didn't go, I had Maria in 82. And this is another crazy thing when I think about it. I had her in September. At the end of October, I won the US Open.
Okay, wait, September.
Like 8 weeks later. No, 8 weeks after I had her, I won.
Oh my gosh.
I know, isn't that nuts?
Yeah, most people would have taken the entire pregnancy off, not competed for at least 6-8 months afterwards.
Oh, I didn't take the entire pregnancy off. I actually was living at the Olympic Training Center, won the Colorado State Championships when I was 4 months pregnant. And then I thought, well, I should probably quit competing because you have to cut weight and you can't cut weight when you're pregnant. Yeah, and I trained I did judo up to the week before she was born. And I went running up to the day she was born. And then a week later, I was back on the mat, which again, I look at all the stuff in retrospect, like, that was pretty nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy, but it's also, you were pretty excited, pretty like motivated to be great, right? I mean,
well, I just figured if I want to get my spot back on the US team, I had missed all these tournaments being pregnant. So I had to, I had to go back and win this tournament.
Yeah. And
at the time, it just seemed like, well, that's what I got to do if I want to be number one again. So yeah, I'm going to practice.
There wasn't even thought of, no, not doing it. It was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And just got to figure out how I'm going to do it.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So I saw you at a Pan Am's games. I watched the video of you at a Pan Am's games against somebody from, it was Venezuela.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty funny. They said, one girl comes up to you and says, they're saying something like Venezuela, or think in your head that they're saying AnnMaria.
No.
It's
funny too, because Natasha Hernandez, and maybe I owe an apology, maybe not. I went out there to break her arm. Mm-hmm. She was, I would say, the second best person I ever fought. The best person I ever fought was Sue Williams, who I fought in the finals of the world. But Natasha Hernandez actually went up a weight division and then won the world championships at the weight division above me.
Wow.
So she was actually the first person from the Pan American Union to win a world championships, because she won it the day before me. And then the lighter weights competed the next day. But yeah, she was good. And I knew she was good. And competition, I'm out there to win gold medals for the United States, right? I am, people sent me there. I could not afford to fly to Venezuela. I couldn't afford to do the things that I did. People donated money, little old ladies, clipped orange juice box tops and all. So I went there thinking, I am here representing my country.
Yeah.
And I am taking it home the hardware. And I knew that she was good. And I knew she was getting better. I mean, she was probably 17, 18 years old at that tournament. And I thought, the next time you see me across the mat, I want you to have a bad memory.
Yeah, I could see it in your eyes. You looked intense. You looked super intense when you guys would lock up. I could definitely see you were there to dominate.
Well, and that's one reason too. When Ronda was young, I was selective about the places that I let her go and things I let her do, because I knew that there were people who were just like me coming up. And it's like, this is for the championship of the world, sure, right? Or this is for the Intercontinental Championship. And I'm sorry if you're in jiu-jitsu or one of those things where they have an intercontinental championship every third day for some organization, but in judo,
every town has their own national championship
every 4 years, right? So, yeah, I mean, I knew when Ronda was coming up that there were going to be people like that too, that were going to try and put a beating on her, so the next time around she'd remember it. Sure. So I was pretty selective about the things that I let her go to, and when I thought she was ready to, put some beatings back, then I let her go.
Yeah, she put a few beatings on some people. So typically, you rolled judo into business, right? Like you were in judo first. You developed a certain grit, a certain level of success, and you rolled that into business. A lot of fighters, and I heard this this term recently. A lot of fighters don't have a second act, right? A lot of fighters, you're a fighter, and when fighting becomes, you're no longer successful at fighting, a lot of them will just continue to compete and lose, and they'll get older, and you can tell their skills are diminished, and they're 30, 40, 50, still maybe they are the corner man for some people now, or they're coaching a couple athletes. But you decided to move from an elite level at judo into an elite level in business.
Right.
How were you mentally able to do that? It's not the same thing. You're not physically throwing people. You're now in an office building. You're now coding. Mentally, how are you able to transition like that?
Well, I did a couple things. One is, unlike a lot of athletes that I see now, I did these things in parallel. So I won the US Open the same year I graduated from college, right? I went and I got an MBA, and I was working as an industrial engineer at General Dynamics while I was competing on the world team. So I did those things at the same time. I didn't put off having a business career until I was done competing. Now, I would say I would have left a little faster in my early career if I hadn't had to take time off here and there to go and train. But I had those connections, I had education. So when I stepped out of the competition realm, I wasn't starting out without a degree, without any experience. So I had that. Mm-hmm. And then I had the good fortune, I think, the club that I was at, that there were several people who were on the Olympic team who were a few years older than me, like 4 or 5 years older. So I could see people who took one of two trajectories. I had teammates who they competed, that's all they did. Mm-hmm. And I had teammates who competed and went to school and had a job. And the ones who competed, and that's all they did, maybe they did a little bit better while they were competing, but then once they were done, they had nothing. They were, loading trucks for a living, which is fine. But after a while, you get old and broken up. And if you've been competing at a high level, you're broken up to start with. Yeah. And then the ones who had gotten an education and had been getting some work experience, they were able to go and work in international business for 3M. Yeah. So I had those two opposing paths right in front of me. And it was clear to me, I could see down the road because I had those role models right there. So for me, I didn't put everything else on hold. And I really don't think that's a good idea to do. And people say, oh, you don't know what it's like nowadays. I do. But you know what? You don't train 10 hours a day. Your body will not let you do that. You can maybe train an hour or so in the morning, maybe a few hours later, your body has some rest. And then you train another hour and a half, and maybe a few hours later after you've rested. So at the max, you can maybe train 4 or 6 hours a day. Yeah. That leaves you plenty of time for a job or school.
Absolutely. And training correctly. I mean, you can go run 10 miles, or however many miles over the course of 4 or 5 hours. You're just going to overtrain and be unsuccessful in the end anyway. That transition's super important. I see so many athletes that were really good and they were so dedicated and so high level, and then they just kind of disappear. There's unfortunately, they don't seem to grasp the fact that they put so much effort into one thing. If they did that in something else, they could probably get that same level of success. You really could do that. So anyway, this is out to all you MMA kickboxers, fighters that are listening to this and are thinking that the career's over. Shift gears one more time. Because you have so many interesting things going on. You told me today that you were just recently appointed to the California State Athletic Commission.
Yes, it's very interesting because you have to be appointed by the governor. Okay. And there's a lot of levels of interviews and background check and credit check. And then at the very end, they ask, do you have anybody political who can recommend you? I don't even know anybody who knows anybody in politics, right? Like I know Arnold Schwarzenegger because we're both in the International Sports Hall of Fame, but since he was the previous governor, I figure him and the current governor probably are not besties, right? But other than that, and I only know him from sports, right? I vote every now and then. I'll write a check, but I don't go to any political anything. And the other people who were appointed, like he was, chair of the Gavin Newsom for mayor of San Francisco campaign. And then there's me. And normally when somebody asks me to do anything on any nonprofit board or anything, I just say no. Yeah. I'm running a company. I have 4 kids. I have 8 grandkids. I have a husband. Running a startup sometimes like pushing water uphill. I have a lot of employees that count on me. We have 110,000 users that I try to be responsive to their needs. So no. But when I got asked about the athletic commission, when I was a young athlete, I felt like a lot of the old people in charge making these rules had no idea about what I went through. You're not cutting weight. You don't know. This is my whole life. You don't know what it's like to be out here. And you're telling me, oh, you can't go back. I mean, if anybody had known, like, for example, how bad my knee was, I've had it replaced since. I've had 8 knee operations. Anybody had taken a look at me 3 weeks before the world trials, I had knee surgery. And they wouldn't have let me compete if they'd known. So I kept it a really big secret. We
Not
actually,
nowadays.
oh, God love him, our team trainer came with me and we spread this big rumor that we were having an affair. I mean, we told his wife that we were going to do this because otherwise, why would I have a trainer come with me? This was not something people did back in the day, right? No, nobody could touch me but Mitch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're an affair with him. But no one was, because if they'd taken one look at my knee that still wasn't healed, they'd be like, oh no, you're out. But I need to be taped up. And he taped me up, you know, and you can't, in judo, you can't have any metal. And so he taped me up as well as, you know, like basically anything you could do without putting some hard object in there. And then he's like, okay, you only need to get third to make the world team, right? Because you're ahead on points. So as soon as you get, you've beaten everybody, you're in the top 3, you got to pull out. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, hell no. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going there, but.
The athletic commission, it's probably not going to happen nowadays.
The athletic commission. So I don't think these old dudes understand this, right? This is my whole life. Yeah. And so when they asked me to be on it, I said, sure, I think somebody needs to be on the commission that, number one, knows what it's like to be an athlete out there. Yeah. And also, it was all men. So there's more and more women getting into MMA and boxing and other combat sports. So I think it's good to have a woman representative, not just because I'm a woman, but because I'm a woman who has competed. I understand not just things like sexual harassment and the possibility of assault, but other things like cutting weight. It's so unfair, man. I would go into the sauna with my teammates and we would be there for 2 hours, and me and my friend Dawn, we would come out, we'd have each lost like a half a pound and the guys would have lost 3. Oh, yeah. But just things like that maybe if you're a male coach, you don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what does this entail now? So what do you know what your role is going to be, what you're going to be doing with the athletic commission? Are you going to be on, is it judo, MMA? Where are you going to be?
Okay, so the athletic commission is 6 members, 6 commissioners, and there is a state agency within consumer affairs that approves things. If you want to be a promoter, you send in all your paperwork, documentation. If you want to have a world title fight, you would send in here's the people we're going to have fight. And they would look at all that and see, for example, does it look like there's too big a discrepancy in that? So the commission's job is to look out for the safety of the athletes and the general public, that if you don't want people who are incompetent being corners, you don't want people who are incompetent being judges, and it's possible for athletes.
Guys in every state then, because I've been to a lot of fights.
Right. So every state has a commission. So the state agency follows the policy. The commission does 2 things. Basically, it sets the policies and it hears appeals. So if someone comes up with an idea that it's unsafe for athletes to lose more than 15% of their body weight within a short period of time, then that would be a rule that would come up to the commission. And we would look at that and vote on it. Okay. And then that becomes policy, and then the state agency would enforce that policy. Or if you want to, this has been public, so it's not like the meetings are all public. So there was a young man who was a boxer. He was a world champion. He got injured, had like a detached retina or something. Eye injuries are very common in boxing. So he was out on medical suspension for a certain amount of time, and now he wants to come back and fight. And so he goes to the commission, says, I want to come back and fight. I want you to take me off medical suspension. So they would get information from his doctor. The commission has a doctor, and they would look at it and say, do we feel like it's safe for this person to go back and fight again or not?
Okay, so you're basically there for the safety of the athletes, keeping things uniform, I guess.
Well, the safety of the athletes and also for the general public, because if you go to a fight, you want to see a fight that's fair. You don't want somebody who's got, metal in their gloves or any of that kind of nonsense. So it's basically making it fair and safe overall, and making sure that all of the people who are involved, whether they're referees or judges or promoters, are treated fairly, that one promoter doesn't get a leg up in the better venues than the other ones do, and so on.
Will you be going to events as a member of the commission?
Yes, I try to do that. It's kind of funny because one of the things that they say you get paid $100 a year, right? This is not something you do for the
private
money.
jet money right there.
Right. They say, oh, you get the best seat in the house because usually the commission is sitting behind the judges, because then you see, like, when the boxers are done, they take their gloves off and they give them to the judges. So you're seeing that they actually wore the gloves that were approved and that were signed off by whoever checked them. They cut off their wraps again because you're making sure that all of the procedures are followed. Yeah. But I kind of laugh because pretty much I'm sure if I wanted to get a front row seat to a UFC fight, I could ask my daughter to give me a ticket. Yeah. So it's not a big
I don't think you really need bonus,
that. But I do go. I went there was a Charlo versus Castaño fight for the world title here not too long ago. I went to that. Sugar Ray Leonard is doing a charity event on Wednesday in Beverly Hills. So I'm going to go to that. So I am trying to go to things when I can. Nice. Because I think it's important for the athletes to know that you do know who they are. You're not some old person. So you're not some old white dude in charge up in your office on the 20th floor looking down on them that has no clue what's going on.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So we're gonna shift gears one last time. I asked my wife and daughters. You know, I have daughters just like you. I said, hey, what about questions? Like, I know you guys have questions. My youngest daughter is a very big fan of Ronda. So I asked them for questions. One question was, as a mom, and it's a fairly vague question. As a mom, how do you raise champions?
My goal is not to raise champions. My goal is to raise good people. I was just talking to my mom actually this morning and bragging on Ronda. And I said, people think I'm proud of her because she got famous and made a lot of money. I'm proud of her because this weekend I showed up at her house with 14 kids from South Central LA. And she could have just said, okay, Mom, I let you use my house. There's the pool, and gone upstairs and, you know, played video games. And she took them all on a tour around the property. She explained to them sustainable farming and how they develop and how you actually make soil. She showed them where the monarch butterflies have their chrysalises. She sat down with them all in the pool while they all played. And, you know, her husband went and ordered food for them all. She got in the wrestling ring with them. I try to raise good people. My youngest daughter, Julia, was in judo, and then she went into soccer. But I had more than one coach say to me about Julia that she is what we try to develop in judo, kids who are strong but not mean. And Julia's a tiny little thing. She played soccer in middle school and all the way through college. And she started soccer when she was 11 or 12, pretty late, you know, because a lot of kids start when they're 5, 6, 8 years old. And she played defense. And she said to me early on, she tried out for the city all-star team, which she did make. Now, let's be honest, out of the 14 kids they picked, she was probably 13 or 14, but she did make it her very first tryout. Yeah. And she said, Mom, I know I don't have the ball handling skills these other kids do because they started 5, 6 years ahead of me. But she said, I'm not afraid of anybody. And I that's one of the things I have tried to instill in my children. You know, I was very pleased more than once. I've had people say about my kids that they walk into a room like they have a right to be there. Mm-hmm. And Maria, my oldest daughter, was a journalist, and she won an award for a series she did. She was living in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is not the bastion of bilingualism and liberalism. And she was covering the World Cup. And because she's bilingual, she did her article in Spanish and English. And she would do one in English on like, what's the World Cup and why do people care? And then she would do one in Spanish on like because if you're Latino, if you're from Mexico, for example, you know what the World Cup is, right? Absolutely. And so she would write about all the players and stuff. She had hate mail to the paper. You know, why don't you go back to Mexico? It's like, I was born in San Diego, okay? And her editor came to her and said, do you want to quit doing this? Because she's like, no. I speak Spanish. I lived in Spain. I lived in Costa Rica. I am proud of who I am. I'm proud of being bilingual. And no. And when she got this award, people wrote about her and they said, Maria has the most important quality in journalism, courage. So if you ask me how all of my girls who are very different, Maria is now CEO of our company. She was a writer for Sports Illustrated, ESPN. Jennifer is a history teacher in the Los Angeles School District. Ronda is in the WWE. Julia just graduated from college. I think one thing is I have always encouraged my girls to speak up for themselves, and I will have their back. And a lot of people say, oh, my kids come first. But when it comes down to it, would you pull your kid out of a club that they were at if the other parents would talk trash about you? It's like, yeah. There's times when I have gone and argued with my kids' teachers. I went to the school district when Maria was in high school because she wanted to pole vault. And pole vaulting was a male sport. So I put on a designer suit. My children called it my Dr. Rousey disguise. Mom puts on a suit. Somebody is in for a come to Jesus meeting. And I went down to the school district and I had a meeting with the athletic director. And I said, look at me. Do I look like I never heard of Title IX? I will not sue your sorry ass. Because if that's what you think, here's my business card. You turn away, you look back and you look again. And after that, pole vaulting became a co-ed sport in the state of North Dakota.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So it seems like your kids are like super resilient. So no matter what comes at them, whether it be the soccer, making the soccer team, even though you're not, you probably don't have the best skills or Rhonda has plenty that have been well documented. Would you say resilience is one of the biggest things to teach a young child?
I kind of hate that term because I grew up really hard, and sometimes people try to say, look at her and she's successful, kids are resilient. It was very hard and a lot of bad things happened and a lot of my friends ended up dead. So I'm cautious about saying resilient. I think that my children have never had a doubt that I loved them and was doing what was best for them. Now, they may have disagreed with what I thought was best for them, but I think having that unconditional love basis, and you think everybody has it, but they don't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I know people that they don't talk to their kids, and there may be things that your children do that are so far over the line that you just say no. But I know people that don't talk to their kids anymore because they're gay. Or I knew somebody who just threw a kid out of the house because of that. It's like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Or they don't talk to their kids because they buried somebody they disagreed with. They made some career choice they disagreed with. They felt like they weren't respectful to them enough. I think loving your children unconditionally is not a guarantee. I know people who do everything right, and then sometimes their kids get addicted to drugs or alcohol or whatever. But I do think raising kids is hard. And someone once said, you will put in the hard work raising your kids or you will raise your grandkids. So far, so good.
So far, so good. Yeah. And getting the information from someone like you, who has already done it, whose kids are having kids now, is super important. I know, like we say, we tell younger people, oh, when you get to my age, you'll understand what I'm saying, but it really is important because I was looking at video of my daughters last night from years ago. And I remember when they were doing things as really young kids, just the cutest, like little videos. And I'm sitting next to my high school daughters that are like, leave me alone, Dad, don't talk to me. They have no interest in me right now. Right. But, but like you said, having their back, even during, those times were the easy times, having their back, when everything was cute and it was easy. But right now, when they're like, I don't like you, Dad, it is difficult, not impossible, obviously, but it is difficult to keep that. I don't know how to even describe it, maybe continuity or stability there, where you still have their back, even though they definitely don't seem to like you. Maybe you could talk on that just for a sec.
Well, I think it builds from the beginning, that even at those times when they're telling you they hate you and you're boring, you're stupid, and oh my God, you're ruining my life.
Yep.
If you have been there all along, they really know deep down. It is difficult for me. I mean, now they're all doing great, but when they were younger, oh my God, sometimes I bit my tongue so much. It's amazing. I still have one left. My late husband used to say, oh, you do that woman thing. I just hate that. Will you quit talking to me? And I really didn't do it like, oh, I'm giving you the silent treatment. It's because you can't take something back, right? You could say, if you say something really hurtful to a person, you could say, oh, I take it back. I didn't mean it, but they still heard it.
Yeah.
So for me, maybe your children are wonderful and perfect and they never do this, but there are times when I just wanted to shake them, or I wanted to just really scream at them. And those times I would leave the house, walk around the block, go for a walk in the woods, because you can't take those things back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm very blessed and fortunate to have three very, very good kids. I got
so far.
so far. My youngest is, she's doing a little bit of martial arts. She's doing a little punching, kicking. So we walk up, the second we see each other, it's a wrestling match almost instantly. So, but other than that, things are going good. Other than the physical violence she's putting on me right now, it's pretty good. But yeah. So AnnMaria, do you have anything else you want to let us know? Anything else you want to finish with?
A couple of things. First of all, anybody who is interested in supporting us, I would super duper appreciate that, because lots of people say, oh, what you're doing is such a good thing. And here's the reason I do it. You talked about people who, they decide their kid is not good at math. I think that's complete baloney. There's no such thing as somebody who doesn't have a math brain. Math is, you see this thing behind me from our game, that's the pyramid. Math is hierarchical. You build on a base. And so if at a young age you miss that base, you never quite understood division, or you never quite understood fractions, then you have trouble going up further. It's not because you don't have a math brain. It's not because you can't do it. It's that at some point you miss that basis. And if you went back and got it, you would do fine. Yeah. And here's what I've seen happen to so many kids. And here's why I do what I do. I see kids, they're in school. They, for whatever reason, maybe don't have as much help at home or in school as they could use, and they fall behind. Now, if you don't learn about the Civil War in 6th grade, you can still learn about, Eastern Europe or whatever they're teaching in 8th grade and do fine. But if you don't learn about fractions, you're not going to get decimals. You're not going to get exponents if you haven't learned about multiplication. And so kids start thinking, oh, I'm not good at math. And every year they fall further behind and they think, you know what, I hate school. School sucks. I'm not good at this. And they drop out. And that changes their whole trajectory. If what we can do is make it just a little bit easier, okay, I get it. I get how you do long division. I get what ratio is. And yes, math stuff, okay, it's not that hard. And maybe I'll stay in school because my mom really wants me to. And you graduate, and it's just changing their whole life. That's what we do. That's why we do what we do. I know that sports can do the same thing, that a student gets someone who pays attention to them, and they decide to stay in school and be a little less trouble. And that's why we do what we do. So I think anybody who's a teacher out there, whatever you're teaching, it's not valued enough that almost anybody listening to this right at this moment, no matter how old they are, can probably think of either the best or the worst teacher they ever had. Absolutely. That's what makes a difference. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we're doing, is we're trying to make a difference. And anybody who wants to haul in and make a difference with us, instead of, spending your money on overpriced yoga pants, hey.
Good deal. Where can people find you?
7generationgames.com. It's the number 7, generationgames.com.
Okay. And I'll put everything in the show notes as well. Where else? And
I'm on Instagram, AnnMaria7. It's the number 7, Jen, Gen. And I am on Twitter, Dr. AnnMaria. A smarter person would have used the same thing everywhere, but there you go. That person wasn't available, so you got me.
All right. I have one question to ask you to finish off the podcast.
Right.
The podcast name is LandLife, right? We buy and sell vacant land, just dirt and trees, pretty much. And so my question for you is, if you could buy land anywhere in the whole world, anywhere, you could own land anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Well, I've traveled a lot. So I think I'd have to reduce it down to one of three places: tropical.
Okay.
So my daughter has a farm out in Hawaii, and I really love her farm out there. It's in a very remote, very not touristy part. So I like that. A lot of my family lives in Trinidad and Tobago, down in the Caribbean. So I really like it there. So that might be very tempting. And I also really like Belize. Not so much the touristy part, like where everybody goes diving, but actually where the Mayan pyramids are in Belize.
Yeah.
So it would be, I'd have to do either Belize, Tobago, or one of the more remote Hawaiian islands.
Okay. How big does it have to be?
Well, Ronda has 12 acres. I think that's a good amount of space.
Okay.
Because if you can buy up some property, because otherwise you never know, somebody can just go and build a house right next to you. And
Yeah.
I like that, being able to walk around and not see anything but, the cattle egrets.
Perfect. So we'll back you up to some Bureau of Land Management area land, so they can't build on it. 12 acres right there, road frontage. You're good to go.
Yep.
All right. AnnMaria, I really appreciate it. You had so much information. This is the longest podcast I've ever done. This is the first female podcast I've ever done. So I really genuinely appreciate all your information, all your insight, and all kinds of interesting things. And guys, 7th Generation Games, go out and get it, buy it, play all the games, show all your friends, and show it to any teachers or anybody in that field where it would be able to immediately help people out. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you next time on LandLife.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.